At 2:07 a.m., the lights in the Whitmore Tower flickered once, twice, and then went dark. The sudden silence was almost louder than the hum that had filled the elevator moments before. No music. No mecánica elvir. Just the soft clunk of metal as the car jolted and stopped between floors. Clara Whitmore's breath caught in her throat. She stood alone in the elevator, one hand still gripping her phone, the other braced against the wall as if she could physically hold the building together through sheer will. The meeting replayed in her mind on a relentless loop. The boardroom, the numbers on the screen, the quiet disappointment she hadn't allowed to show. A deal she had spent months negotiating had fallen apart in less than 10 minutes. She had kept her composure until she reached the elevator. Now, in the dark, there was no one left to impress. Outside the steel walls, rain hammered against the building, a steady rhythm that echoed faintly through the shaft. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the elevator in a muted yellow glow that felt too small, too intimate. Clara checked her phone. No signal. Of course. She pressed the emergency button once. Then again, harder. Nothing. Clara exhaled sharply, forcing herself to stand still. She was used to control, used to decisions being made because she made them. But here, suspended between floors, in a building she technically owned a controlling interest in, none of that mattered. She wasn't in charge anymore. Footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the elevator doors. "Hello," Clara called, hating the edge in her voice. The footsteps stopped. A moment passed. Then a calm, steady voice answered, slightly muffled through the metal. "Yeah, I hear you." Relief rushed through her before she could stop it. "The elevator stopped," she said, unnecessarily. "I think there's a power outage." "I noticed," the voice replied, almost amused. "Hold on a second." There was the sound of keys, then a soft knock against the door. A man's silhouette appeared through the narrow glass panel as the emergency lights reflected off a mop bucket beside him. "I'm Ethan," he said. "I work nights. Building maintenance." Clara swallowed. Clara. He didn't ask for her last name, didn't recognize it, or if he did, he didn't react. He crouched down so they were eye level through the glass. "Power's out on this side of downtown," Ethan said. "Backup should kick in, but it might take a bit." "How long is a bit?" she asked. He shrugged. "Could be 5 minutes. Could be longer." Clara nodded, jaw tight. She hated not knowing timelines, hated vague answers, but there was something about his tone. Steady, unhurried. That softened the panic just enough to keep it from taking over. Ethan glanced at her shoes, then at the briefcase still clutched in her hand. "Long night." She let out a short laugh. "You could say that." He stood and disappeared from view for a moment. When he came back, he was holding a small plastic bottle of water. He tapped gently on the glass. "Mind if I sit?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Go ahead." Ethan sat down on the floor, outside the elevator, back against the wall, as if this were the most natural place in the world to be at 2 in the morning. He twisted open the bottle and held it up where she could see. "Emergency stash," he said. "I keep a few around." Clara reached through the narrow opening at the bottom of the door and took it. Their fingers didn't touch, but the gesture itself felt unexpectedly kind. "Thanks," she said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain filling the space between them. Clara realized how rarely she allowed silence without trying to fill it with plans, with explanations, with solutions. Ethan broke it gently. "At least," he said, resting his arms on his knees, "you're not stuck alone." The words landed softly, but they stayed. Clara felt something in her chest loosen, just a fraction. She hadn't realized how isolated she felt until someone named it without judgment. "I suppose there are worse places to be stuck," she said. He smiled just a little. "Definitely worse." Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time felt different without movement. Finally, a low hum vibrated through the walls. The lights brightened. The elevator shuddered, then slowly began to descend. Clara straightened instinctively, smoothing her jacket, preparing to step back into the world where she was expected to know exactly what she was doing. The doors slid open at the lobby. She stepped out, heels clicking against the polished floor. The rain was still coming down outside, visible through the glass doors. The city washed in reflections of streetlights. "Looks like you're free," Ethan said from behind her. Clara nodded. She took 2 steps toward the exit. Then she stopped. She turned around. Ethan was already gathering his mop and bucket, ready to fade back into the background of the building. For the first time in years, Clara didn't feel the urge to rush forward. "Thank you," she said, "for staying." He met her eyes, surprised. "Anytime." Clara hesitated, standing there under the dim lobby lights, aware of something unfamiliar and unsettling. For the first time in a very long time, she didn't want to leave just yet. A week later, Clara arrived 10 minutes early and immediately regretted it. The Italian restaurant sat on a quiet corner not far from the river, its windows fogged slightly from the warmth inside. It wasn't trendy. There were no exposed brick walls or carefully curated playlists, just soft yellow lighting, white tablecloths that had seen better days, and the low murmur of conversation that felt lived in rather than polished. She chose it on purpose. Clara checked her reflection in the window. Simple coat, no visible jewelry, hair pulled back in a way that didn't invite attention. Tonight, she didn't want to be impressive. She wanted to be ordinary. The thought unsettled her more than any boardroom confrontation ever had. Ethan walked in exactly on time. He looked like he had spent longer deciding what not to wear than what he eventually settled on: dark jeans, a button-down shirt that was neatly pressed but clearly well-loved. He scanned the room, spotted her, and gave a hesitant smile that didn't try too hard. "Hi," he said, stopping just short of the table. "Hi," Clara replied, standing a little too quickly. They laughed at the same time, the tension easing just enough to let them sit. For the first few minutes, conversation stayed safely on the surface. Work hours, favorite comfort foods, whether Portland rain was worse in fall or winter. Ethan talked about the building, how quiet it felt at night, how you started noticing small sounds when everything else shut down. Clara talked about long days and short evenings without specifying what filled them. She noticed he didn't ask many questions about her job. Not because he wasn't curious, but because he seemed careful, like he didn't want to step somewhere he didn't belong. And she noticed herself doing the same. They ordered pasta and water. No wine. No appetizers. "It's good here," Ethan said, glancing around. "Nothing fancy, but it's solid." "I like solid," Clara said, and realized she meant it more than she expected. As the plates arrived, the conversation shifted into something easier. Childhood stories, favorite movies they rewatched when life felt heavy. Ethan mentioned his daughters briefly, only their names, Ava and Mia, and the fact that they were 6 and endlessly energetic. He spoke about them with a quiet warmth that made Clara listen more closely than she intended. She told him about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, about leaving because she thought success lived somewhere else. She didn't say what success looked like now. Halfway through the meal, Clara caught herself smiling without thinking. Not the careful, practiced smile she wore in meetings, but something softer, something unguarded. Then the check arrived. The small leather folder landed between them with a weight that felt heavier than it should have. Ethan reached for it instinctively, then paused. Clara did the same. Their hands hovered, then pulled back. Ethan started, then stopped. Clara cleared her throat. "We can split it." "Yeah," he said quickly. "Of course." There was no argument, no awkward dance over who should pay. Just 2 people quietly doing the math in their heads. Clara slid her card into the folder, then hesitated. She glanced at Ethan's face. Open, unreadable, and something in her tightened. Not fear. Awareness. He added his card without comment. When the waiter returned and took the folder away, neither of them spoke for a moment. It was Ethan who broke the silence. "I should probably say this before it gets weird," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm not great at expensive things. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That's okay, she said. Neither am I. He looked at her then, really looked at her like he was checking for irony and finding none. The waiter came back. The transaction went through. Nothing dramatic. Nothing embarrassing. Just quiet relief on both sides of the table. They stepped outside together, the cool night air wrapping around them. Traffic hummed in the distance, softened by the damp streets. A street lamp cast a pool of warm yellow light over a wooden bench nearby. Without discussing it, they both sat down. The city felt far away here. The noise muted. The pressure lifted. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Thanks for suggesting this place, he said. It feels normal. Clara nodded. I needed normal. They sat in comfortable silence, watching rainwater gather at the curb and slide toward the drain. After a moment, Ethan said, I don't really know what I'm doing with this. With dating. Clara smiled, small and honest. Me neither. That was enough. As they stood to leave, Clara felt something settle quietly inside her. Not excitement, not certainty, but something steadier. She realized that there were people in the world who made you feel safe without promising anything at all. And that, she thought as she walked to her car, was worth coming back for. Clara stood in the narrow hallway outside Ethan's apartment, holding a paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon and sugar, and wondered if she had made a mistake. Not about coming, she wanted to be here, but about how little control she had over what would happen next. The door opened before she could knock a second time. Hey, Ethan said, stepping aside to let her in. He looked different in daylight, less guarded somehow, softer around the edges. They're excited. I might have mentioned cookies. I brought backup, Clara said, lifting the bag. That was all the warning she got. Two small bodies barreled toward her at full speed. You're Clara, one of them shouted. No, I'm Clara's favorite, the other corrected, grabbing her sister's arm. Ethan laughed. Clara, this is Ava and Mia. Ava, Mia, this is Clara. The girls stopped inches in front of her, staring up with identical curiosity. Same dark curls, same wide eyes, same gap-toothed grin. Clara crouched instinctively, bringing herself to their level. Hi, she said, unsure whether to wave or offer a handshake. Mia solved the problem by hugging her legs. Ava followed immediately. Dad says you got stuck in an elevator and didn't scream. Clara smiled. I considered it. That seemed to satisfy them. The apartment was small but warm, sunlight spilling through the windows and landing on a floor scattered with crayons, puzzle pieces, and the unmistakable evidence of a life lived loudly. A couch with a faded blanket. A kitchen table covered in school papers. A sense of motion even when no one was moving. Ethan watched from the doorway as Clara sat on the floor with the girls, helping them open the bag. Cookies appeared. So did Sprinkles, apparently acquired somewhere between the kitchen and the living room. Dad doesn't let us have these on school nights, Ava said solemnly. Dad's not home on weekends, Mia added, as if that explained everything. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I'm standing right here. Clara laughed, surprised by how easily it came. They spent the afternoon like that. Nothing planned, nothing impressive. Coloring books. A board game missing half its pieces. Music playing softly from a speaker on the counter. The girls argued and made up and argued again, pulling Clara into their world without hesitation. At one point, Mia climbed into Clara's lap without asking, settling there as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Ethan noticed. He noticed everything. He stood at the sink, pretending to wash dishes that were already clean, watching Clara help Ava spell her name in uneven block letters, watching her listen, not just politely but fully when Mia explained in great detail why her favorite stuffed animal needed a haircut. Clara fit too easily. That scared him. When the girls disappeared into their room to build something loud and complicated out of pillows, Clara stood and brushed cookie crumbs from her hands. This place feels alive, she said softly. Ethan shrugged. It's messy. It's good messy, she replied. He nodded, but the tightness in his chest didn't ease. They sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet. You don't have to do this, he said suddenly. Clara looked up. Do what? Be here, he said. With them. He stopped, searching for the right words. I don't expect you to step into my life like this. I know this might just be stop for you. The word lingered between them. Just. Clara opened her mouth to respond. But before she could, the girls reappeared. Ava climbed onto a chair and looked at her with serious eyes. Clara? Yes. Mia stood beside her sister, fingers twisted together. Are you going to stay? Clara's breath caught. Ethan froze. Stay. Not tonight. Not for cookies or coloring. Stay in the way children meant it, unchanged, permanent, promised. Clara looked at their faces, at the hope they hadn't learned to hide yet. She thought of her own life built on movement and momentum, on never lingering too long anywhere. She began, then stopped. She didn't know how to answer honestly without hurting someone. So she smiled instead, gentle and careful. How about I stay for dinner? The girls accepted this immediately, racing back toward the kitchen to announce the plan. But Clara felt the weight of the question settle deep in her chest. That night, as she drove home through quiet streets washed in late afternoon light, she understood something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. If she stepped forward, it wouldn't be into a relationship. It would be into a family. And she knew, with a clarity that left no room for excuses, that she couldn't step into something like that halfway. The email arrived at 6:18 a.m., quietly, the way important things often did. Clara read it once, then again, her coffee cooling untouched beside her laptop. The subject line was neutral, operational. Adjustments. Q4, the kind of language that smooths sharp edges into something easier to swallow. She scrolled past charts and percentages until she reached the attachment. A list. Departments. Positions. Names. Her breath slowed as she scanned downward, already knowing what she would find before she saw it. Facilities services. Night shift. Cole, Ethan. For a moment, the office felt smaller. The glass walls reflected her back at herself. Tailored jacket, steady expression. The version of Clara Whitmore who made decisions without hesitation. The version people trusted to do what was necessary. Necessary. The word pressed against her chest. An hour later, she sat at the long conference table on the 38th floor, the city stretching out beneath a gray sky. The room was all clean lines and cold light, white LEDs casting no shadows, as if emotion itself had been designed out of the space. Margaret Hale sat across from her, hands folded neatly on the table. She had been on the board longer than anyone else, her silver hair pulled back, her expression composed in a way that suggested she had seen every version of this meeting before. Daniel Ruiz stood near the wall, tablet tucked under his arm. He wasn't technically part of the board, but facilities fell under his purview, and his presence was procedural. Necessary. Clara listened as the CFO outlined the plan. Cost savings, efficiency, streamlining, words delivered smoothly, practiced. When the floor opened for discussion, Margaret spoke first. These adjustments are unfortunate, she said evenly, but unavoidable. We've all made difficult choices to get where we are. Her gaze flicked briefly to Clara, then away. Daniel cleared his throat. From an operations standpoint, the list is fair. Seniority, attendance, coverage needs. We followed policy. Clara nodded, though something inside her resisted the simplicity of that explanation. She imagined Ethan's apartment in the afternoon light, Ava's careful block letters, Mia's head resting against her knee as if it belonged there. She imagined the quiet dignity with which he moved through the building every night, unseen, reliable. Policy didn't account for that. Clara folded her hands on the table. Before we vote, she said, her voice steady, I'd like to say something. The room stilled. She didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. She simply spoke. These numbers make sense, she said. On paper, but they don't show the full cost. Margaret's brow furrowed slightly. Clara continued. Facilities isn't a line item. It's people who keep this building running when the rest of us have gone home. People who know the rhythms of this place better than anyone. Daniel shifted his weight, uncomfortable but attentive. I understand the need to adjust, Clara said, but I don't believe cutting the lowest paid positions is the only responsible option. The CFO leaned forward. With respect, Clara, alternatives would affect other areas. Areas that drive growth. Clara met his gaze. Growth without responsibility isn't growth. It's erosion. The word hung there, heavy. Margaret studied her closely now, something unreadable passing across her face. Clara took a breath. I'm proposing a restructuring. Reduced executive bonuses this quarter. A phased adjustment that preserves essential staff while we rebalance. Silence. Daniel spoke carefully. That would require approval at the highest level. Clara nodded. I'm aware. The vote was called. Hands lifted. Some hesitated. Some moved decisively. When it was over, the outcome was clear. The restructuring passed. But not without consequence. As the meeting adjourned, Clara remained seated, the weight of what she had chosen settling fully onto her shoulders. She knew what the headlines would say, what shareholders would ask. She knew she had made herself a target. Margaret lingered by the door. For a moment, Clara wondered if she would speak at all. Then Margaret turned back. You'll pay for this, she said quietly. Not unkindly. I know, Clara replied. Margaret held her gaze a second longer, then nodded once. I paid too, she said, almost to herself, just in different ways. She left without another word. Clara signed the final document alone in her office, the pen heavy in her hand. When she finished, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired and certain. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the shift that had just occurred. Clara looked out at the rain-streaked windows and thought of a wooden bench under a yellow streetlight. She had chosen, and she knew there would be a cost. Ethan heard about the decision the way he heard most things, secondhand, quietly, without ceremony. Daniel Ruiz caught him near the service elevator just before midnight, his tablet tucked under his arm, his expression unreadable. Your position's safe, Daniel said. All of them are. For now. Ethan frowned. What changed? Daniel hesitated, then shrugged. Restructuring. Came from the top. The words followed Ethan through the building long after Daniel walked away. From the top. He finished his shift on autopilot, mopping floors that reflected the city's lights back at him in dull streaks. By the time he stepped outside into the cold air, his hands were shaking. Not from the weather, but from understanding. Clara. He didn't call her. He didn't text. He sat in his car with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel, replaying every moment of the past few weeks. The way she listened, the way she fit, the way Ava and Mia had taken to her without hesitation. And now this. The next evening, Clara knocked on his door just after dinner. The girls were in their room, arguing over whose turn it was to choose a story. Ethan opened the door and knew immediately that something had shifted. Clara looked tired. Not the surface exhaustion of long days, but something deeper. Can we talk? She asked. He stepped aside without answering. They stood in the small living room, the lamp casting a low, warm glow that barely reached the corners. The familiar space felt suddenly unfamiliar, as if it had changed shape overnight. I heard about the restructuring, Ethan said before she could speak. Clara nodded. I wanted you to hear it from me. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, I did. The certainty in her voice landed like a blow. Ethan turned away, pressing his palms against the back of a chair. You don't get it, he said. That wasn't your responsibility. She took a step closer. You're not a line item, Ethan. That's exactly the problem, he replied, sharper than he intended. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe. You paid a price for this. And I can't. He stopped, the words catching. I can't be the reason you keep paying. Clara reached for him, then hesitated. I chose this, she said. No one forced me. That's worse, he said. He finally turned to face her, and the fear she saw there made her chest tighten. I've been here before, he said. A long time ago. He sat down heavily on the couch, elbows on his knees. Clara followed, staying close but not touching. There was a training program, he said. Maintenance certification. Would have meant day shifts, better pay, a real path forward. Clara listened, her heart sinking. I was qualified, he continued. My supervisor told me to apply, said I'd be good at it. Why didn't you? She asked gently. Ethan let out a short, humorless laugh. Because I was scared, he said. Not of failing, of succeeding and realizing I didn't belong there either. He looked up at her then. I told myself it was about timing, about the girls. But the truth is, I didn't think I was enough. The room felt smaller, the silence heavier. When you did what you did, he said, voice low, it brought all of that back. You stepping up, taking the risk I never did. Clara shook her head. This isn't about courage comparisons. It is to me, he replied. I can't let you carry this while I stay exactly where I am, pretending that's okay. She understood then. Not fully, but enough. You're pulling away, she said. He nodded. I don't want to, he said. But I don't know how to stay without hating myself. The girl's bedroom door creaked open. Ava appeared first, clutching a book to her chest. Mia hovered behind her. Dad? Ava asked. Is Clara leaving? Clara's throat tightened. Ethan stood, moving toward them automatically. Ava looked past him, eyes searching. Are you going to come back? She asked Clara. Like before. Clara opened her mouth. Ethan answered first. Go finish your story, he said softly. We'll talk after. The girls hesitated, then retreated, the door closing with a quiet click. Ethan turned back to Clara, his expression fractured. This is why, he said. They don't need someone who might leave. Clara stepped closer, tears burning behind her eyes. Neither do you. He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head, just once. I can't, he said. Clara didn't argue. She didn't beg. She nodded, slowly, and picked up her coat. As she reached the door, she paused. When you're ready to forgive yourself, she said, I'll be here. After she left, Ethan sat alone in the dim light until the girls came back out, sleepy and quiet. Mia climbed onto his lap. Is Clara mad? No, he said. Ava looked up at him, her voice small. Is she coming back? Ethan stared at the wall, the weight of everything pressing down on him. He didn't answer. 6 weeks changed more than Clara expected. The headlines never came. No public fallout. No dramatic collapse. Instead, the company adjusted, slowly, quietly, like something learning a new balance. Turnover stabilized. Productivity held. A few cautious messages from board members arrived, then stopped. Margaret Hale sent one short email that said only, "You were right to insist on seeing people." Clara read it once and closed her laptop. The victory felt muted, necessary, but incomplete. She stood at the window of her office long after the city lights came on, watching the rainless night settle into stillness. For the first time in years, her calendar was open. No meeting, no call, no decision demanding her attention. There was only one place she knew she needed to go. The bench sat exactly where it always had, beneath the yellow street lamp near the restaurant, its wood worn smooth by years of waiting. Clara slowed as she approached, half expecting it to be empty, and half afraid it wouldn't be. Ethan was there. He sat with his hands folded, shoulders slightly hunched, as if he had been holding the same position for a long time. The light caught the familiar lines of his face, the quiet seriousness that had once drawn her in without effort. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. Neither of them spoke right away. The night was calm, The kind of calm that only came after something had already broken and been put back together differently. A light breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere, a car passed, its sound fading quickly. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Ethan said finally. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," Clara replied. She sat down beside him, leaving a careful space between them. Not distance, just respect. "I heard things are steady now," he said. "At work." "They are," she answered. "It turns out people do better when they're treated like they matter." He nodded, staring ahead.
I'm glad.
They sat in silence again, the bench holding their weight the way it always had. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring," Ethan said, his voice low. "I left because I was afraid." Clara didn't interrupt. "I'm afraid of being seen," he continued. "Of stepping forward and finding out I don't belong anywhere better than where I am." He let out a breath. "And I was afraid that, if I stayed with you, I'd keep comparing myself until I couldn't stand it." She turned to face him then. "I never asked you to become someone else." "I know," he said. "That's what made it worse." Clara considered this, the quiet honesty of it. Then she spoke carefully. "I didn't come here to convince you," she said, "or to fix anything." He looked at her, surprised. "I came because I wanted you to know something," she continued. "I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need you to prove anything." Her voice steadied. "I need you to stay, if you choose to." The words settled. Between them, simple and unadorned. Ethan closed his eyes. For a moment, Clara thought he might stand and walk away. Instead, he turned toward her fully. "I don't know how to forgive myself all at once," he said. "But I'm tired of running from it." "That's enough," she replied. He searched her face, as if looking for conditions and finding none. Slowly, he reached for her hand. Felt like an agreement more than a reunion. Footsteps sounded behind them. "Dad!" Ava's voice carried softly through the night. Mia stood beside her, fingers curled into the sleeve of her sister's jacket. Ethan turned, startled. "What are you two doing up?" Mia shrugged. "We couldn't sleep." Ava looked from her father to Clara, then took a small step forward. "Is this okay?" Clara knelt, opening her arms without thinking. The girls stepped into the space immediately, one on each side. Ethan watched them, something unguarded breaking across his face. "This is okay," he said, his voice thick. "This is good." They stood there under the yellow light, four figures connected not by promises, but by choice. Clara looked at Ethan over the girls' heads and smiled, small and certain. For the first time, none of them were waiting for something to happen next. They had already decided to stay. For months later, the morning light came softly through the kitchen window. Clara stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, holding a chipped mug of coffee, watching Ava and Mia argue over who had lost the other shoe. Their voices overlapped in the way only siblings could manage. Half complaint, half laughter. Until Ethan stepped in with the calm authority of someone who had mediated far more serious disputes before breakfast. "Shoes," he said gently, "are not worth crying over." Ava crossed her arms. "It's not about the shoes." Mia nodded. "It never is." Clara smiled into her coffee. The courthouse ceremony was scheduled for 10 o'clock. No floriste. No guests beyond a clerk, a judge, and two children who had insisted on wearing dresses that twirled when they spun. Clara's own dress was simple, something she already owned, pressed carefully the night before. Ethan wore the same jacket he had worn on their first dinner, cleaned and mended where it had needed it. Nothing about the morning felt rushed. At the courthouse, the judge smiled kindly and spoke in a voice that carried no pretense. The words were familiar, unremarkable in the way that made them real. When Clara said yes, she felt it settle, not like fireworks, but like something locking gently into place. Ethan's hand was warm and steady in hers. Ava and Mia clapped too early, then clapped again anyway. It was over in less than 15 minutes. Outside, the sky was clear, the air crisp. The girls ran ahead, laughing, spinning in circles on the courthouse steps. "That's it," Mia asked, looking back. You're married now? That's it, Ethan said. We're married. She considered this. Okay, she said, satisfied. What's for lunch? Life, Clara thought, rarely waited for meaning to announce itself. The afternoon passed quietly. Groceries, laundry, a shared meal that wasn't fancy but was warm. Later, as the sun dipped lower, Clara noticed something new on the kitchen counter. A glass jar sat near the sink, clean and empty. On the front, written in uneven letters with a blue marker, was a single word. Enough. She turned to the girls, who hovered nearby with expressions that suggested they were very proud of themselves. What's this? Clara asked. Mia answered immediately. It's for us. Ava nodded. Dad said we should keep one. Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching them with a soft smile. Keep one what? Clara asked. Ava thought for a moment. One reminder, she said, that we don't need more stuff. Mia added, Dad says we don't have a lot, but we always have enough. Clara felt something tighten in her chest. Not pain, but recognition. She knelt down so they were all at eye level. And what goes in the jar? Ava shrugged. Whatever we want. Mia grinned. Good days. Ethan laughed quietly. That was their idea, he said. Mostly. Clara reached out and touched the glass. It was cool and solid, unremarkable in every way except the meaning it carried. That evening, after the dishes were done and the girls were tucked into bed, Clara and Ethan sat together at the small kitchen table. The house hummed softly around them, the sound of something settled. I used to think having enough meant having control, Clara said. Or security. Or proof. And now? Ethan asked. She looked at the jar on the counter, at the doorway to the girls' room, at the man across from her who had chosen to stay. Now I think it means not being alone, she said. Later, as night fell, Clara found herself thinking of the bench under the yellow streetlight, the place where things had first slowed down enough for her to notice what mattered. She could see it clearly, the worn wood, the quiet space between decisions. A place where no one had promised anything. A place where everything had begun. She turned to Ethan, already half asleep beside her, and felt the quiet certainty of the life they were building. Not grand, not perfect, but real. Families, she understood now, weren't built by having everything. They were built by choosing not to leave anyone behind.